Manipulism and the Weapon of Guilt, Collectivism Exposed. Written by Mikkel Clair Nissen. Narrated by David Bucci. Chapter 2, Cold War II. Collectivists will read this book, but in an attempt to deny the evidence, they will not really read it thoroughly. Instead, they subconsciously will look for ways to distract themselves from the facts. Any excuse is valid. If it is not looking for spelling mistakes, then it will be looking for research errors. Then they would want to see proof of a PhD, yet even a PhD would not be enough. Unless, of course, one uses the PhD to establish how happy Danes are. A collectivist will always deny, belittle, and intimidate, but never truly research. Severe pathological narcissism, more precisely a mindset referred to in psychology as magical thinking, is the key to collectivism's progression, survival, and continuance. I once sat admiring my daughter, age 6, doing crazy things interactively with a children's program on TV. At one point, she glanced at me, smiled, and said, "Am I not skilled, Daddy?" "Yes, you are very, very clever," I replied. The situation made me think about the mental freedom that my daughter still possesses. A mental freedom still liberated from my country's oppressive collectivist mentality. The right to be her unique self and confidently express herself freely. She will be deprived of this mental freedom by Marxism's powerful emotional iron grip here in Denmark if I do not teach her how to protect herself from it. This mental prison is an oppressive collectivist mentality that has been misunderstood and misinterpreted through almost a century. It is perceived simply to be Scandinavian culture, described as the Jonte Law. The Jonte Law, subliminal conditioning, malignant narcissistic coercion. Don't think you are anything special. Don't think you are as good as us. Don't think you are wiser than us. Don't convince yourself that you are better than us. Don't think you know more than us. Don't think you are more important than us. Don't think you are good at anything. Don't laugh at us. Don't think anyone cares about you. Don't think you can teach us anything. The Jonte Law was first described in the novel A Fugitive Crosses His Track in 1933 by the Danish author Axel Sandemos. His observations and thoughts describe the consequence of more or less 3/4 of a century of continuous advancement of oppressive collectivist mentality in the Danish society. The fictional Danish town of Jonte lives by its own 10 commandments, named the Jonte Law. This slow intellectual process of radicalization started roughly a few decades before the Communist Manifesto was published in 1848 by the Germans Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels, when the utopian idea of socialism was originally presented in the United States in 1825 by Robert Owen, a Welshman. The Jonte Law is unquestionably not a unique Scandinavian phenomenon. The mentality is commonly known worldwide. In Commonwealth countries such as Australia, New Zealand, Canada, and Great Britain, it is referred to as tall poppy syndrome, a pejorative term that is more frequently used in the most socialistic influenced of these nations. The term is also referred to as schadenfreude, referring to someone envious and scornful who takes pleasure in demeaning others, a loan word used in English from the German word schadenfroh, that is commonly used in the democratic socialism countries of Scandinavia, for example, Denmark, Norway, Sweden, and Finland, as well as in Russia. Behind the former communist Iron Curtain, the mentality is also known as hell, for example, in Poland as Polish hell. In all cases, these syndromes are uniquely linked to Marxism, the notion of social equality, all forms of fascism. Whether called crab mentality in the Philippines, if I can't have it, neither can you, or the Jonte Law in Scandinavia, don't think that you are more than others. The tall poppy syndrome in Marxist-influenced Commonwealth countries, cutting down the tall poppy, or schadenfreude in former Nazi-occupied Germany. These syndromes all describe the same condition of pathological narcissism that thrives commonly in collectivism on undermining and is driven by severe inferiority complex. Depending on how severely deprived the person's self-esteem is, the consequent result can be narcissistic personality disorder, or NPD. Narcissistic behaviors occur as defense mechanisms, described as the lack of ability to take criticism as a result of low self-worth or feeling inferior in certain situations. We are all born as narcissists and gradually mature our immature narcissistic ego into a healthy subconscious adult identity. Unhealthy narcissism appears in this stage of development if the process of the emerging individual self is by some means disrupted. Should narcissistic behaviors or feelings reoccur frequently, be strong or tough to control, this is then referred to in psychology as pathological narcissism. Frequently, this is caused by poor standards set by others, such as intervention by parents, friends, and society. Hotchkiss' 7 Deadly Sins of Narcissism. Hotchkiss identified what she called the 7 deadly sins of narcissism. Shamelessness. Shame is the feeling that lurks beneath all unhealthy narcissism and the inability to process shame in healthy ways. Magical thinking. Narcissists see themselves as perfect, using distortion and illusion known as magical thinking. They also use projection to dump shame onto others. Arrogance. A narcissist who is feeling deflated may reinflate by diminishing, debasing, or degrading somebody else. Envy. A narcissist may secure a sense of superiority in the face of another person's ability by using contempt to minimize the other person. Entitlement. Narcissists hold unreasonable expectations of particularly favorable treatment and automatic compliance because they consider themselves special. Failure to comply is considered an attack on their superiority, and the perpetrator is considered an awkward or difficult person. Defiance of their will is a narcissistic injury that can trigger narcissistic rage. Exploitation. Can take many forms but always involves the exploitation of others without regard for their feelings or interests. Often the other is in a subservient position where resistance would be difficult or even impossible. Sometimes the subservience is not so much real as assumed. Bad boundaries. Narcissists do not recognize that they have boundaries and that others are separate and are not extensions of themselves. Others either exist to meet their needs or may as well not exist at all. Those who provide narcissistic supply to the narcissist are treated as if they are part of the narcissist and are expected to live up to those expectations. In the mind of a narcissist, there is no boundary between self and other. The narcissist feels emotionally threatened when other individuals appear confident or challenging, creating an urge to belittle, intimidate, or humiliate. This is referred to in psychology as malignant narcissism. These emotions are caused by arrogance and envy and are triggered by criticism, undesired reality, facts and insights, or anything that appears superior to the narcissist's sense of worth, characterized in psychology by the sense of entitlement. What better place to be for the narcissist, to be worshipped, to be in a superior mind-controlling position, such as psychiatry, tutoring, media, or politics, or to be part of a complete collective society adapted to these coercive, narcissistic societal manners, and the resultant universal pathological narcissism where everyone expresses themselves as equals. Though nearly an exact description of oppressive collectivist mentality, Sandemos's novel still has a few inconsistencies. One example is that one is allowed to think greatly of oneself, but is intimidated into never expressing it in obvious ways. I have, therefore, carefully clarified the mentality for which basis I elaborate in the following description of the mentality's behavior, that is, though minutely different, the mentality known around the world as tall poppy syndrome. The tall poppy syndrome, with its origin in Australia, dates back to the 1860s, just after the Communist Manifesto was published. It refers to a powerful yet common mentality that people of all countries are subject to in some degree. Symptoms include bullying as a completely normal part of any child's process of building identity and self-esteem. Among adults, contemptuous behavior and malignant narcissism is routinely performed by envious, immature people, who are driven by severe pathological narcissism and lack initiative, and as a result, exploit the easy way by trying to bring down surrounding individuals to their low level of accomplishment. Consequently, depending on a country's level of radical collectivist influence, the mentality, when adopted by collectivists and continued into adulthood, is unequivocally transformed into manipulism. Social psychological theory, manipulism. To lower self-esteem, consequently generating feelings of inferiority and codependency. Subjectively destroying independence to thereby facilitate complete intellectual control with fictive contentment. Ideologies are replaceable with an emotional scale, a psychological index by means of only 5 topics of significance. 1. Collectivism, or codependency, versus individualism or independency. 2. The ability to maintain positive personal boundaries between self and other, for example, normative egoism, versus the inability or unwillingness to maintain personal boundaries between self and other, egocentrism and narcissism. 3. Self-motivation by and prioritization of individual self-interests, for example, normative egoism, versus forcing upon others one's ideals for personal interests, severe pathological narcissism. 4. Contentment versus discontentment. And 5. Evading personal responsibility versus claiming individual responsibility. Tall poppy syndrome, belittlement as part of the process of building one's identity, takes place in all nations around the world, especially in the school system among the youth. Almost all of us have been bullied in school or have bullied others. Even in cultures where adults who are largely independent and liberated mentally, all people are collectivists throughout their dependent childhood and teen years. The major difference is that dependency lessens as liberated cultures endorse the emerging individual self through encouraging individuality and independence by way of supporting confident self-encouragement, self-assurance, and benign envy, all of which raise the level of self-esteem. Once dependency decreases, the belittlement wears off with age. Yet in democratic socialism, to accomplish, protect, and maintain social equality and authoritarian dominance, the inferiority complexes and schoolyard bullying gradually intensify into pathological narcissism in the teenage years, and ultimately into manipulism. Inevitably, calculated adult bullying, malignant narcissism, continues all through life. In the last century, the tall poppy syndrome, though it would best reflect its appalling behavior if it were in fact named tall puppy syndrome, in relation to the way a small dog will show its power through loud barking and hostile actions toward larger dogs to whom it feels inferior, has simply been described as bullying, where the weakest, driven by low self-esteem, pick on the strongest. In the case of democratic socialism, instead of the usual one or a few individuals being weakened, the whole citizenry is slowly shaped into an oppressed society. Accordingly, when the frailest parts of society are given a promise of social equality, this sets in motion the syndrome of manipulism through the process of learned helplessness, via government bribery, that weakens them further. The incentive to create vital self-esteem is corrupted. Consequently, basic human survival instinct slowly shapes an envious oppressive organism. In other words, the schoolyard bullying, the usual madness shared by two, referred to in psychology as folie à deux, is slowly nationalized. The organism, at this point a potent collective unity, again always with its origin in the frailer parts of society and driven by envy, is ready to exploit others for personal gain. All of this is the result of severe pathological narcissism, which stems from feelings of excessive self-importance and magical thinking that generates illusions of extreme moral superiority, unification by fantasies of the perfect utopian society without any poverty, where all people have equal opportunities and are treated entirely equally, justification for excessive entitlement and expectations of unreasonable, favorable treatment without mandatory achievement. Ignorance, denial, omniscience, magical thinking, and a lack of ability to take criticism further result in arrogance. Additionally, lack of ambition, and the urge to feel equal is the source of envy. To mentally denigrate and socially assimilate becomes its common goal. What takes over is learned helplessness, human nature's basic survival instinct. The mentality is one of personality mind control, of malignant narcissistic coercion in an attempt to weaken and disable society's natural source of questioning and criticism. To achieve, protect, and maintain collective accomplishments, the mass mentality is slowly shaped and gradually accepted into all levels of society as common behavior. This is all a perfectly harmonious process that slowly replaces actual individual contentment with codependency, referred to in psychology as a dysfunctional relationship where a person, typically the stronger party, becomes psychologically submissive and dependent on pleasing others. For example, nurturing their addiction, their poor mental health, immaturity, irresponsibility, or underachievement, or by mimicking other people's opinions in need of continuous relations. Public narcissistic trends increase as society grows weaker, with the initial warnings being excessive entitlement and an increase in traits such as bad boundaries, magical thinking, and failure to accept responsibility for personal actions. In addition, a rise in bullying is evident in the largely radical collectivist-influenced public school system. Last but not least, an essential key to it all is a steady increase in suicide rates. However, in this new age, these obvious signs of suppression, clearly evident in all totalitarian collective societies, are kept in balance by suppressants through a steady increase of anti-anxiety medications and antidepressants, for example, happy pills. Society becomes more and more deprived, in lack of ambition, and grows reliant upon the perfectly steady increase in entitlement benefits, solidified through learned helplessness, successfully blinding society to the rapidly increasing collective oppression. This precise process of ambient socialism has taken place in the United States during the end of the 20th century and continues to transpire even more rapidly in the 21st century. Ambient socialism, or universal welfare society, is democratically and fundamentally dependent upon mental equilibration through the weakening of society's general level of self-esteem, the necessary implementation of the severe inferiority complex. Without any doubt, socialism democratically is a slow, subliminal, passive-aggressive process. It takes decades and generations to subdue the more independent right wing and create codependency to fully establish and achieve neo-communism. This describes the exact process that has slowly but steadily taken place over a 150 to 180 year span in Denmark, as well as throughout most of Europe. Rolled out over decades, this process ultimately achieves its goal of blinding society's citizens to think of this malignant collectivist mentality as an ordinary part of their culture. Coercive collectivist societal rules, subliminal conditioning, malignant narcissistic coercion. Don't question or criticize society, its citizens, or society's structure. Don't express uniqueness. Don't express individuality. Don't express self-assurance. Don't try to educate. A truly liberated individual will quickly realize that collectivism's oppressive mentality is, curiously enough, the exact opposite of liberated. The inhibitions of severe pathological narcissism, malignant narcissism, act to protect against all outside influence and to hold in place or eliminate any threat toward society's structure and collective way of thinking. Every individual is then slowly adapted throughout their upbringing to succumb to these coercive, narcissistic societal manners. Through the weapon of guilt, every person will impulsively and involuntarily police, guard, and defend the mentality's inhibitive rules in any way possible. These predictable and observable behaviors, as a result of subliminal conditioning, are also known in psychology as psychopathic narcissism. The level of the average person's understanding of this mentality is evidently determined by the level to which one has stood up against it. All Danes know that the oppressive collectivist mentality thrives, yet in order for Marxism to prosper, it is vital that the truth never gets out. The best weapon to achieve this is magical thinking, either through absolute denial or by pretending that the mentality is a thing of the past. Many pretend to believe this mentality does not presently exist or that it does not truly affect them. Mistakenly, some even take the oppressive collectivist mentality, for example, Jonte Law, for an act of humility. While in truth, the gap between humility and the need to debase others is immense. Hypocritically, even collectivists hate this disclosed mentality. Yet when confronted with the facts, no one is willing to struggle for its discontinuance. One reason, besides personal feelings of inferiority, is that socialism, democratically, cannot survive without this mentality. Totalitarianism describes a society coerced and completely controlled by some means of government. The Danish government is completely monopolized, as it acts in direct competition with private businesses, and gladly disregards any individual right, law, or constitutional amendment to control its population. Even so, in democratic socialism, this authoritarian control is to some extent less carried on by the government, although the government is still a powerful coercive force. The near-complete force behind democratic socialism is in fact intellectual, the ambient emotional Cold War for the vote, which gives the mandate to govern society. A subliminal battle, Machiavellian egocentricity, subjectively achieving actions of imaginary generosity, which nonetheless are potent undermining measures that are controlled by codependency, merely to avoid confrontations or feelings of personal guilt. Society's monetary lower class masquerades as selfless altruists by using malignant narcissistic coercion, for example, contemptuous behaviors known as shame dumping, to undermine and thereby control the stronger society. This is characterized by undermining for personal gain, for example, means and control, which are perfected by superficial sympathy accomplishing enticement, utilizing the weapon of guilt and calculating misuse of the message to care for society's weakest, and creating history's greatest perfected form of corruption. A mentality designed for one purpose only, which is to undermine the populace with the intent to radicalize society's otherwise confident right-wing individualistic voters, and thereby to keep complete intellectual control of the entire political democratic process. An everyday story. One day when I was in the process of buying a pillow in a shop in Denmark, I engaged in a nice conversation with a young lady who took my order. Since it was around noon, there were only a few customers in the shop. We spoke back and forth for about 5 minutes. As the girl handed me a plastic bag, telling me it was free of charge, a complete stranger walked by us. He overheard me say in a pleasant conversational manner, "I am much obliged, as I do find it ironic that we pay the equivalent of 50 US cents or more for a plastic bag in supermarkets here in Denmark, bringing us Danes to pay an average of $140 US annually simply for plastic bags. Having lived in Australia and the United States, I can tell you that in those countries, plastic bags are usually free, and on top of that, they frequently pack the bags for you. Here in Denmark, we pay triple for everything and typically get no service in return." The complete stranger, a male who had been passing by, walked up beside me and shouted, "If you are not satisfied, then move to Australia." He then quickly walked away. Toddlers under the age of 2 can already perfectly manipulate by using their parents' love for them to coerce their parents, which accomplishes dominance by utilizing the weapon of guilt. This often causes problems for parents who are easily controlled by self-intimidation and are unable to process shame in healthy ways because of severe inferiority complexes that can cause anxiety. Therefore, these parents frequently give in to the child's demands. In some cases, the roles of the child and the parent, the strongest authority, switch places. These are the tools of guilt, projection to accomplish codependency, that the monetary lower class uses in democratic collectivism to mentally overpower the strongest parts of society. Imagine if every time you showed any signs of true individualism or confidence in yourself, your fellow citizens in some way intimidated you. With dominance as the objective, denigration is often disguised as reverse psychology or sarcasm, which is known as humor of the weak mind. You are slowly and systematically being mentally manipulated, preferably conditioned all through your childhood. In other words, you are undermined, intimidated, policed, preyed upon, and altogether subjected to ambient coercion in order to suppress your true individual self. This constitutes a form of stealth abuse known in psychology as ambient abuse, also known as gaslighting. You are indoctrinated to despise confidence, to lower your expectations, to never question or criticize society, to never be better than others, and to never stand out or be different from society's collective human organism and its goal, social equilibrium. Now weakened and feeling inferior, you are made to feel false contentment. You are blinded for collective suppression with fictive contentment, all of which is found in dependence upon society through the collective human organism and government bribery with entitlement benefits. This is Marxism's pathological mind game. Collectivism is using severe inferiority complex to create undermined human beings. Completely controlled by extreme pathological narcissism, they are programmed like robots to manipulate, intimidate, twist, and police guard their societal surroundings. These malignant inhibitions are necessary to keep complete control of society, a society designed to use coercion, manipulation, enticement, and guilt as the main weapons. This creates a society in absolute need of suppressive coercion because manipulation, intimidation, and the weapon of guilt do not work on the strong mind. A quote by Winston Churchill: "Socialism is a philosophy of failure, the creed of ignorance, and the gospel of envy. Its inherent virtue is the equal sharing of misery.